Yeah, all good.
All right. Want to call the meeting to order for the Blue Ribbon Capital Project Visioning 2025 Advisory Board of January 22nd to order, and announce that we have a quorum present. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from January 15th.
So moved.
Second.
Heard a motion in a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, the motion passes. And at this time, first on the agenda is Community Relations and Tourism Director, Mr. James Kunke.
Thank you very much. I'm going to walk around to the control. So I know there's been some discussion about public art as it relates to some of these capital projects. So I wanted to present some information to you showing what the possibilities are, what some of our other cities in the area are currently doing, what the law says, and what options might be available to you if you decide to go down that path. Hoping that I know how to work this. I do. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just kind of define for you what we mean by public art, so we're all talking about the same thing. It's not just all statues of guys on horses, although we used to have one. Talk about the direct and indirect benefits of public art. I'll be very brief on that. This was really originally drawn for a council discussion, but I want you to at least see what kind of benefits there are, and it's not just looking pretty. Review some of the council action that's been taken already related to public art. Look at different types of public art funding programs that other cities have related to capital projects, and show you what the options are. So public art is, again, not just sculptures. It's pretty much any type of visual or even in many cases interactive or performance activity that brings the arts into contact with the public. You can see there's a portion of the list here. You got traditional contemporary sculpture, historic monuments, statues, obelisks. If you've been to Paris, one of their most popular works of public art is a big obelisk in the middle of a street intersection. It can be murals, indoors or outdoors. You might have a series of smaller pieces that are all the same theme or maybe just the same location instead of one large piece. It can be a venue for public performances. It can be interactive elements involving public participation. For instance, if you put a concrete square or cube in a public park and put a sign up and make that your poet's corner, that could be a type of public art, even though it's not something you look at, it's interactive. It can be treatment of ground surfaces. I'll show you some photos in a minute to give examples, but you can do things on the ground that are artistic and bring art to the public. And then also, just create a presentation of mundane elements, things you have to have anyway, benches, bus stops, things like that. Some cities have gotten really, really creative on bus stops, where each individual bus stop has a unique appeal. And in fact, if you go to any of the DART rail stations have public art worked into their stations. Some of it is pictures, some of it is murals, some of it is carvings, but they've incorporated art into their stations for the DART rail. So here's some examples. This is more traditional. This is in urban. You've seen the Mustangs. There's Big Sam down in Huntsville. Is one of my favorites. It lets me know I'm almost to Grandma's house. Here's some examples, smaller scale. These reflect the communities they're in, the woodlands with the deer. The statue here, actually the gentleman who posed for that passed about 2 years ago. And he was a really good guy. He was on the arts board, and they are part of the library board down in Euless. Arlington, they're trying to put a focus on the music. These are more contemporary. The one in Fort Worth, very well received. The one in Mesquite, very popular now. When they're putting it in, it's a little controversial because it's not traditional. It's not a guy sitting on a horse. But contemporary art in public settings has a lot of appeal. These are non-traditional art. You see here on the top left with Lubbock, those are wind vanes that I guess they need a purpose. In Lubbock, the wind's always blowing. But they made them artistic. Instead of just an arrow or just a rooster like on top of a barn, these are in the shapes of birds. You see on the bottom left in Fort Worth, the bench has shape to it, but also there's some ground treatment where they put in some very fancy work on that you walk on and step on, but it is artistic. It's the appeal. And over on the bottom right, there's a bench in Lake Travis that is a functional bench, but it also is artistic, and they actually got a sponsor. There's a plaque on the ground there. So ways of making art a part of what you're going to do anyway, just enhancing it. Now this is out of Houston. Houston is an example of a series of smaller works making a larger piece. And they originally had about 8 smaller sculptures in their downtown district near the George R. Brown Convention Center. And then it was so popular that they started getting a lot larger pieces. Some of these here are pretty big that That violin, you can see two people standing in the bottom left. Now, they're a little bit back, but that violin, probably about 40 feet tall. Some of the others are smaller. This almost looks like a Tetris game down here, the Lego blocks, if you will. That's about 12 feet tall, and it's in the middle of their park. So it's a whole series of them, and it takes a few hours to walk it all. It's a pretty popular attraction for convention goers in Houston. This is a mural in Austin. Actually, it was privately funded and privately restored, but it gives you an idea. In this case, the mural reflects the community it's in. And some areas, Plano does a lot of murals in neighborhoods, where they get people in the neighborhood to join together and paint them. And it's amazing, they never get vandalized, because the people who painted are right there in the neighborhood, and you don't mess with their stuff. If you have an artist in the family, or if you're an artist yourself, you know you don't mess with their art. If you haven't been to Amarillo, you got to do this at least once. Bring spray paint. This is just a bunch of, there's 10 buried, half-buried Cadillacs out there, and it draws thousands of visitors. Now, it's also not a public piece. It was done privately, but the public has supported it by putting in a parking area, putting in some gate security, and paying for cleanup. It's clean right now. If you go, the odds are pretty slim it'll be this clean. There's usually going to be a whole bunch of spray paint cans all on the ground there. But public art is not just a statue of some famous person. Public art is not just a famous painting on the wall of City Hall. It can be a lot of different things. Now, when people talk about benefits of art, they usually start by saying it makes you feel good, it makes you feel like a community. But in fact, public art, when used in downtown districts especially, but also in other communities, does have a positive economic impact. Part of it is businesses looking to relocate do consider those cultural things. You see some examples here. Volkswagen went to Chattanooga, Tennessee in 2012, and their executive said the arts environment was a deciding factor when they chose Chattanooga. Boeing chose Chicago. They were close to choosing Dallas. When they chose Chicago, they said it's because Chicago had a richer, more diverse cultural offering than Dallas did. For the museums, for their employees to go do things. They want happy employees. You've got some groups. National Governors Association said in 2012 that healthy art presence draws visitors, boosts tourism, and boosts the local businesses. And it also can attract new residents. Residents who like art in their community often are kind of residents that are involved in their community, and involvement is a good thing. You're in this room. I think you know involvement's important. Feeling good about your community tends to motivate you to do that, and art often makes people feel good about their community. So economic impacts are there, they are tangible, and they're recognized by governments throughout the world. It does, of course, create a connection with people. I'm not going to go through each of these for you, but I'll let you know that artists and architects and engineers and government agencies have all come together with various studies. The biggest one's down at the bottom, the Knight Foundation, 43,000 people in 43 cities. And what they found is social offerings, openness, welcomeness, and aesthetics, such as art and parks, rank higher than education, higher than safety, and higher than the local economy as a driver of attachment. In other words, people, when they asked, why do you feel so attached to your community, they were far more likely to list those aesthetic things than they were to list their schools, their police and fire, or even their business community. So public art resonates with people. And then it does create a positive community image. You might recall that several of you were involved, in fact all of you I think were involved in Lewisville 2025. That's the point, isn't it?
Yes.
I should have thought that through. And most groups have to say many of you. But Lewisville 2025, there was a lot of talk in there about the community image. All 4 of the subcommittees talked about communication and image being important. And it's in fact one of our 8 big moves. I created a new one, I didn't tell you that. It's the pizza fund. I jest.
Yeah, but pizza's not good for you.
I jest. Apparently I need to invest in memory. But one of the 8 big moves is about communications and marketing, including community image. Public art can contribute heavily to that. And there have been a number of studies that have shown when people, that downtowns that are successful in drawing visitors and successful in retaining businesses typically have an art presence. Think for a moment about the city you have visited in the past year that made the most impressions. You remember the most vividly, most fondly, and the chances are pretty good that there's public art in that area.
And good shopping.
Shopping's important. Shopping's important. So, Lewisville City Council has given the Art Advisory Committee authority to recommend public art. So, in other words, if there's to be placement of art, if someone comes to us wanting to put in art, the advisory committee will make recommendations to council. Council does have the final budget decisions. There's several ways artwork might be selected. One is just accept proposals to put out word, we're gonna put some public art at this location, here's what we have in mind, tell us what you got. And then you pick a proposal off of that. Or that's actually solicit proposals. Accept proposals is an artist comes to you and says, I have an idea, what do you think? So accept proposals, solicit proposals. You can go out and just purchase artwork off the market. Decide we want a statue of animals at the animal shelter, so what's available? And there's always stuff available. You find a statue you like, you buy it, you install it. And you also can commission artwork. You can decide the same thing. We want an animal shelter statue, but we want it to represent the history of animals in the Lewisville community and our heritage and so forth. And you commission an artist whose work you've seen, and they come up with something. So lots of ways to do it.
Can I ask you a question here, or you can tell me, you can answer
Absolutely.
it later? Lewisville City Council has given this authority, but I also know that there was issues about funding it in some aspects.
There were, and we'll touch on that
That's
briefly
okay,
on the
then
next.
you can get into that later. I would just had that question.
We'll touch on it here. The first item, of course, budget authority does remain with council. They're the ones that set the budget. They're the ones that voters hold accountable for that budget. So whether it's putting it in the regular budget or through a supplemental appropriation, they're the ones that decide the purse strings. So far, their funding for the arts has been limited to performances and events through our grant programs. However, that is changing with this budget year. In the 2014-15 operating budget, they approved taking, let me back up, out of the hotel motel occupancy tax fund, you'll hear it called the HOT fund for hotel occupancy tax. State law says you can use 15% of those revenues each year for art support. Now, it doesn't define what support means, but it defines art with a list of about 23 different art forms that can be supported. What we've done, really since 2000, I believe, we've done for at least that long, is we have a grant program, and local organizations can apply for grant money for support of the arts. So the symphony applies for a grant, uses that money to put on their symphonic performances. The ballet applies for grant money, used to go toward Nutcracker, now it goes toward Dracula, but they put on shows with that. This year we have 8 groups that are receiving grant money for that through art support grants. And that comes out of the 15% cap. Now, we always budget below the 15%, and for several reasons. We're a conservative city by nature in terms of finance. We don't want to run out of money. And in this case, the hotel fund can be very volatile. 2006 was really strong. 2007, it tanked. And if we had budgeted and allocated and given out checks for all 15% based on projections, come the end of that fiscal year, we'd have had to go back to the ballet and back to the symphony and say, we can't give you that money, we're out of cash. And either withhold their check or try to get money back from them, and good luck with that. I mean, if you've been with a nonprofit, giving money back is not easy, because you have it, you use it. We don't want to be in a position where we promise a group, we're going to give you $30,000, and then we have to go to them in July and say, we might have been wrong. So we don't budget the full 15%. Now, what council has done, starting this fiscal year we're in now, is they said at the end of the year, at the end of the budget year, what you have not used under the cap, let's roll them into a public art fund. That amount varies from year to year. Some years has been as high as $40,000 or $50,000. This year we expect it to be around 10, but the hotel fund is doing really well this year. We're chugging along, it could be more. So they've set up a fund for the first time, a public art fund. There's no money in it yet. There will be at the end of the fiscal year. So, yes. Well, yeah, if not, I'm going to be crying in a corner, because the first couple of months of this fiscal year have been really strong for our hotels. We meet with them every month, and right now they're happy. You talked about the funding. The question that came up to council was whether we wanted to use some reserve hotel funds to purchase Liquor Shy. There were a number of challenges with that opportunity. The big one being the price tag of $325,000, which would be a very hefty price tag. Council indicated during that meeting that they weren't opposed to the idea, they weren't opposed to the concept, they didn't like the price tag, and there were some other concerns with that particular purchase. So while they did decide at that point, we're not going to spend that money on Liquor Shy, they did not tell us we're never going to spend money on art. And in fact, it was after that discussion that they came along and said, we like this idea. Okay. So there is support for art, it just wasn't support for that particular project.
All right.
Hey, James, I have a question.
Yes.
The public art fund that's being created as part of the 2014-2015 operating budget, that amount that's still coming from the 15% of the arts
Yes.
cap from HOT funding, still has to meet the threshold that the Attorney General puts in place for hotel tax funding to support the arts?
It does, but the Attorney General historically has said if it's art support, it qualifies. Because the law is very specific in listing that as an eligible project and in giving the long list of arts. So if it's art support, it qualifies. And so we feel very good with that. So that money will be set aside, again, assuming all goes well with the budget. Could be more, could be less, could be eaten up. And at $10,000 a year, it would take a while to build up. But here we're talking about other projects. This is not the capital projects. I just wanted to let you know, council is supportive of the concept. They just, to date, have not really pulled the trigger on a big purchase. And then finally, at the end, one reason that they also were wanting to wait is to hear from you guys. When I presented to council several months ago about ways to fund public art, one of them is a capital project set aside, a fee or a percentage of capital projects. And they, at that point, wanted to hear what you think, because we knew you were coming. And staff recommended we wait and bring it to you.
Has there been any discussion, and you may come to this, and if you do, just let me know that, about, say, Toyota decided to come to Lewisville? Could you put some sort of stipulation that they install so much art or a piece of art? Or?
Some cities have done that with economic development agreements. I'm trying to remember the city, and I didn't bring it with me because it's not capital, but there is a city in the area that has in their economic development policies, if they give an incentive, a tax abatement, that the company is eligible for an additional, I think, 5% tax abatement if they'll spend half of that amount on public art on their property. So some cities are doing that, not many, but some are doing that.
There's been loopholes and
It's kind of
things to jump
experimental.
through.
Are businesses willing, I mean, they benefit from it too. Do they see the benefit enough that they're willing to make that investment, and in return, they get an additional tax break?
And I'm not talking about that being the sole public art, but it's a way to supplement public art.
So some cities are trying that, we have not. But it's something that, perhaps council would consider at some point. I didn't even bring it up to them at the time because I hadn't found it. But now I found it, so if we go back, I will.
So if a business does what she's saying and they later want to relocate, do they take that art with them or does it stay?
I believe, from what I read in that policy, it's permanent, it stays.
It stays?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
They have to, they build it, I think it remains their property unless they leave, but it has to stay.
Okay.
Tell just to be clear, we don't have any of that kind of agreements.
Yeah, we
The
don't
city of
have those.
Lewisville doesn't have any of that.
Oh, I know. I was just asking if that does
That could
happen.
possibly, yes.
Yeah, then the art will still stay with us, stay in the city of Lewisville. That's the case.
I'm going
Okay.
off memory, because I didn't prepare on that one since it's not the capital, but that's my recollection, is it would stay. It's easy enough to add that requirement in if you're giving them a benefit.
Okay.
Just a brief slide here to let you know what kind of numbers you're talking about, because when people start talking about art, it's kind of like advertising. There are people out there who tell me, well, you got $300, can't you buy a full-page ad in the morning news? No, I can get an annual subscription.
Yeah.
Advertising's expensive. Art can be very expensive, it doesn't have to be. Here's some examples. Large monument-style sculptures can be $1 million or more. The Big Sam statue, that was a 7-figure statue, but it's also the tallest, well, it was the tallest statue in the state until they added the tongue to the giraffe at the zoo. So it's now the second tallest statue in Texas.
giraffe is tall?
It is, because of the tongue.
Extended the tongue.
Yeah.
The smaller sculptures, wall murals and so forth, you can get them for a few $1,000s, $10,000, $20,000. I mean, really, you kind of set your budget and you see what's available for that. Your cost factors here, you see size, material. Plaster is cheaper than bronze, obviously. Paint is cheaper than metal etching. Your quality, your complexity. Reputation of the artist is a big one. For example, the Slicker Shy statue appraised at between $400,000 and $600,000 because of the name of the artist. The actual materials were less than half that. But because the artist is well known and famous, it became more expensive. Think about if I go paint the Mona Lisa, you're not going to spend millions of dollars on it, but the Louvre does, because it's not me, it's a real artist who's not making any more work. So. The uniqueness of the work, this is an important one, because sometimes, I'll give you an example, there's a development in Southlake that has a very nice statue at their entryway. The developer put it in, the developer spent about $10,000 on it. But it's not limited in any way. There's hundreds of that identical statue in developments all around town. There's one in Frisco. It's the exact same statue. And it's placed almost the exact same way. If you take a picture of them, you can't tell which is South Lake, which is Frisco. So they got a good deal because there's no limit. On the other hand, if it's a one-of-a-kind or a limited edition of 2 or 3, you pay more. You pay a premium.
Which Slicker Shack was?
Slicker Shy was a one-of-a-kind. He originally was going to do 3, and then after he did the first one, the mold broke, and he said, oh, well, I'm not doing it again. So a one-of-a-kind or a limited edition is going to, kind of like if anybody's ever done baseball cards, a one-of-one costs more than a one-of-the-set. Also, placement and installation, relevance to the community. If it applies directly to your community, you might be willing to pay a little more than if it's some generic piece of work. Public perception, if people love it, they're willing to pay more for it. Interest from other buyers, because art can be very competitive. A lot of big pieces, only one buyer is in the process of looking at it at a time. But if you get 2 or 3 in there, it can drive the price up. That's why they take big works of art to public auction. That's why Sotheby's makes a lot of money. Because they take, sunflowers and they put it up there and say, here's a Gauguin, bid, and people bid. And then the current state of the market for art. When the real estate market dried up in 6, 7, 8, art was pretty cheap. When it bounced back up and people had more money to spend, they spent it, and some of them spent it on art. So when the economy's going well, art is more expensive. When the economy is sluggish, art is usually more affordable. Just to give you some ideas, when you start talking about numbers and you see a big number, wow, that's 6 figures. You could buy everything with that. Well, you could, and maybe you couldn't. So here's capital projects set aside. And what this does is it says if you have a project that is X amount of construction cost, not land cost, not environmental things, but construction cost, that as part of the project you would set aside a certain percentage of that to be used for public art at or near that project. About 350 cities nationwide do this right now, according to National Endowment for the Arts. And a lot of those are in Texas. We've got some examples here from our area, and you'll see there's a lot of variation here. And these percentages are interesting. Frisco has a minimum 1%, maximum 2%. So for their eligible capital projects, they always have art, minimum 1%, they don't exceed 2%. Mesquite does a maximum 2%, no minimum, and that's just for selected projects. If a department is building a new facility and they decide they want art in it, they can build in 2% into their budget. If a department's building a facility and just doesn't want to, they don't have to. Denton allocates a minimum of 2% up to a maximum of 4%. And we'll talk about Denton again in a minute about how they pull this off, but 2% minimum, 4% maximum of construction cost for facilities only, they don't include infrastructure. Dallas allocates a maximum of 1.5% for all bond projects that are approved by the voters. That includes infrastructure projects, and that's where they have the at or near. So if they're doing a road project, they will do the 1.5%, but it's not going to be in the middle of the road. It'll be in a median, it'll be on the side of the road, it might be at a corner park that's adjacent to the road. Allen does a fixed 2% of construction costs for bond projects that are approved, of course, by voters. But what they do is they do it for every item on a bond election. So if you have 6 propositions and they total $100 million, they would have 2% of that set aside for public art if they all were approved. And then that could be used for anything on that ballot. So if they wanted to use the entire 2% of the $100 million on one of the 6 projects, they could, instead of 2% at each one of the projects. Now, Texas Government Code 4444029 is the only place in Texas statute that talks about this capital set aside. This is out of language that creates Texas Commission for the Arts, so it's expenditure language. It's not authority language for governments. And it talks about you can do, for a project that costs more than $250,000, you can have up to 1%. And that threw us for a while, because we thought that was a limiting statute. But all of these cities were doing 2%, 3%, 4%. So we called Texas Commission on the Arts, and they said, well, they talked to the AG's office, and that is actually a local percentage, that the 1% in there is strictly an expenditure type legislation, and it affects what they do, but the cities can do whatever percentage they choose. Well, our bond attorney called the AG's office and got the same answer. So it's a local decision, and that's why you see so many cities doing 2%. We're not comfortable with that at the staff level until our bond attorney talked to the AG's office, and that's the answer that she got.
So we're going.
At this point, we are. If you are, and if council is, we're comfortable with what we're told to do.
Did the AG's people put it in writing?
Of course not.
Change email.
Have you dealt with state government before?
So that could change depending on who you talk to on Wednesday or Thursday,
In
right?
theory, it could. Now, staff evolution doesn't change, and it's unlikely. In fact, from what I saw, they were not even familiar with that provision at the time. They just said that's a local decision.
Oh, okay.
So it's unlikely to change. Anything's possible when you talk about state government. And from what we know today and where we sit today, we're comfortable with that 2% other cities are doing if that's the direction of the committee and of the council. Little note here, some cities only do certain types of projects, such as only facilities or facilities and parks. Some exclude streets, some include streets. Most exclude drainage projects, but a couple of them include drainage projects. So it's really a determination of what the council and the public is comfortable with in terms of where you put it. That's again where the at or near a project language comes in that Dallas uses.
James, in the cities that this has been implemented, was it a council decision or was that part of a referendum put before the voters?
All of the ones that I looked at were council policy in terms of whether or not you have that. Now, they might have been approached by residents. Denton's an interesting example. Denton had a policy that was developed originally by their art board to do a 2%, and that was their policy. Then the Convention and Visitors Bureau came in, their tourism office came in and said, we think you need to do more. And the arts people said, of course, yeah, we like that too. So staff recommended minimum 2, maximum 4. But what they're also going to start doing in future elections is, like Allen does, have that as a separate proposal, separate proposition on their bond election. And we'll talk about that on this third bullet here. So all of these, as best we could tell, are in council-adopted policies. None of them are referendums. Now, when used with voter-approved bonds, most cities just put it in the cost of the project. So when a project would cost you $10 million, you instead listed it 10.02 million, and that .02 is used for art.
And it is specified on the proposition. So let's say we were gonna do 2% of the total for streets. Then you would have streets, in addition to streetscaping, art, you'd have a whole list of what that money could be spent on.
Yes. Not all cities are doing that, but some of them are. Denton most recently is, where each proposition says it, and I think that's our recommendation.
Well, Denton actually had a separate
They do
flat
now.
dollar amount.
They do
And
now.
So we're just saying it would be a part of the total number.
Right.
Just in the verbiage it would be listed. That's what our bond council
Yes.
is supportive of.
So that's broken down by proposition. So if you have 6 propositions, each proposition individually would include a public art component in it, if that particular project was considered worthy of that inclusion. Some of them, there's a few cities that specifically in the proposition would say it's a $10 million project, plus we want to have $20,000 for public art. Not many. Most of them that break it out, I mean, they're listed in the language, most of them that break it out do what Denton now has done and what Allen in policy says they will do when they have their next election, which is have a separate proposition that covers public art for the entire ballot. Denton's passed with more than 70% support. That's Denton, we're not Denton. Don't know what would happen here with which approach. There's really not any clear indication as to whether having art included in a ballot proposition helps or hurts that proposition. There's no way to know. No one's done any studies or research to say. Standalone propositions are fairly new. The only example I found so far is Denton. Allen will the next time they have an election.
And you'd have to refresh my memory, because I know we've talked about it like in 2025. Where did that rank again, like as far as your opinion? Is there one over the other that you think, knowing what people have included that in, like 2025 and the charrettes and everything that took place?
I'm not sure I quite understand. You mean what emphasis they gave public art in general?
Yes.
It's a priority.
There was support for it, and I don't have the survey data with me, but the survey data did show there was support, especially in Old Town. And the talk there was just as part of image building. Was saying that if you want Old Town to be special and stand out and draw visitors, you need to do something to draw people there. So there was support. Now, we didn't actually ask about funding. We just, it was something that came up. We didn't even ask. We asked about public art in one question. And it received above the midpoint support, but not the highest support. And that was about what should be a priority in Old Town. And we talked about public art
So it's
displays and
really
performances.
specific towards a part of Lewisville.
It's the only time we asked. Anecdotally, it was mentioned in other areas. The only time we asked about it was in the question, what are the most important things to do to revitalize Old Town? And it ranked higher than parking.
Really?
It did, so,
You can pull that information for the committee.
very easily, I can pull that.
James, why don't you kind of do a little, they've talked about it in 2025 a little bit, but talk about the spinoff with streetscaping aesthetics on the I-35 corridor, what we twisted in with some of the form liners and the 3 different
Oh,
zones.
absolutely, and I wish I had these images for you. There actually will be, people will not call it public art, but it is a public art component in the Interstate 35E project. Right now, I believe it's the 407 and Garden Ridge interchanges, eventually it'll be the others. They're rebuilding those interchanges, and local cities had a chance to kick in some money for additional aesthetic enhancements. And for most cities, that's just a prettier rail, or maybe a better looking name of the city, or putting their logo on it. What City Council has approved for Lewisville, for those 2 so far already, is a really nice etching artistic treatment in the large walls as you're approaching the intersection where the big blank walls are. Ours will not be blank. For example, at the
407.
407, you'll be able to see it where there's 4 corners, essentially 4 panels, and one of them has some bass, one has some catfish, one has a guy fishing off a boat, and one has a skier, I believe. Very elaborate, very detailed. So there's already an artistic aesthetic component built in. That's in addition to rails and ground treatments.
So you're speaking of something like the dart stations, where you pull up to a dart station and the columns may be unique, and every one of them is different, of course, but
Yes.
and that's basically what you're talking about, something.
Each of the
in that-
interchanges will be physically, visibly different from the others, and they each will carry a theme in them.
Kind of like Arlington, like where the stadium and through that
Arlington,
stretch.
very, very good example, just like that, and also Grand Prairie where they have
Yes.
the martins and the
Yeah.
birds. Similar to that, and I think our Grand Prairie might be metal attachments that stick out. Ours will be etched into the concrete.
You'll see it in your
There'll be some color
Braunfels.
changes.
New Braunfels has it, Corpus Christi has some of those.
Well,
You
even
can
like
actually see
the,
the panels now.
the
407.
635
side,
with
yeah.
the stars and the bridges and
Yes.
those kinds
No,
of
they're
things.
called concrete form liners, and you can actually get on 407 and come, you go to Summit, and come eastbound and approach 407, you can see the panels starting to the left and right. They're called form liners, and they actually move in and out on reveals. And they're elaborate with egrets and ducks, and that's part of the lake corridor of I-35, so Garden Ridge and 407 will have a lake theme. And that art will be on the wall that actually have paint and have different colors, and Lewisville really got out ahead of the other cities. Some are trying to catch up now and do it. But you see it at the airport with the airplanes, you see it through Grapevine on 114 the mountains. This can be a little bit more elaborate. It's a
It's
a
most
little bit,
elaborate on I-35.
it's a little cutting edge because it's a little bit risky as far as, I think it's gonna look really great. It's something that's different because the other cities have a windmill or one buffalo and it's 1 or 2. This is gonna be a little bit more elaborate through Old Town or through the urban set, through Main Street and 121. That's the urban, and that's later, but you would have an old train, an old Model T, some sceneries of old downtown. In the Parks region, down by the mall, you would have ball fields, trees, birds, more of a park theme down through Sam Rayburn intersection.
You were asking what's going to be on 35. The places where 35 goes underneath,
Okay.
like at Garden Ridge, those panels are facing 35.
Okay.
Areas where 35 goes over, like at 407, the panels actually face the access road.
Okay.
So
So the
nothing
kids-
is going to be there at 121 and 35?
Business 121 and 35,
Yes,
that's phase 2, so.
just as long as we don't put Motel
It's actually
Ponds
not-
on there.
Oh, no, no.
No.
No more.
Yeah, don't
No,
etch
I
that
don't
in.
believe they're rebuilding, they're just doing some work underneath, but
Okay.
it's phase 2, so, you know.
Okay, good.
Phase 1 doesn't look like we thought it would, phase 2 probably won't either.
Okay. I'm just afraid you get that etched
As long as it's a
on there.
phase 2 and not a phase 2, 3,
Yeah.
and 4.
I got a question. On the 2% of the project cost, would that be outside the bond amount? Or that would have to come as a total?
It'd be part of the bond.
Part of it.
Okay.
Always in.
So going the way most cities have done it, you have a proposition that would say, I'm gonna get a pick animal shelter, even though we're not doing one, just because that's what's in my head. It'll say, $8.6 million to build an animal shelter to include, it would list off the activities, and in there would mention public art and the list of things that would be at that facility. So it wouldn't break it out, it'd be part of that project. And that's my material. Any other questions I can try to answer?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Your voice makes it so much.
I know, he does a good job.
I know, I mean, your voice just, your voice just keep us there with you.
Say next.
It took a while to sink in.
He has a great voice, and I listen to him all day long.
That's in my office one day.
My wife might disagree with that. Listen to me all the time. She now cannot this meeting.
And he sings very nicely too. He's a very hard act for me to follow. But we'll give it a try. So tonight, we're just going to talk briefly about facilities. We thought that it would probably be best if we just gave you a quick overview, kind of a staff priority. Next week, we will spend some time delving into each one of these. Brenda and Gina are going to talk a little bit about after we're through talking about some financing options. So we thought it might help before you start thinking about financing options again to know what we're going to be looking at for facilities. So the first priority is a police administration addition. Currently, police administration is located in the annex. They're on the second floor, so they're separate from all the police department. So you have communications, police and fire dispatch. They're located in the annex and they won't move. They'll stay there. But the chiefs and assistant chiefs, all the administrative staff are in the annex. So those positions would be relocated. The police station was built to allow a second story to be added, so it just goes up. So we'll have some pictures next week and some rendering, and that's kind of a twofold project because not only does it get police all together in one building, but the annex is maxed out. We have we have IT, they have 5 people in one office, so there's nowhere to grow. So that allows them to grow, to meet their space needs, and it puts PD back together with their officers. So we'll talk about that next week. The second priority is the relocation of Station 3, Fire Station 3. Right now, that is located on Corporate and Business 121. With all of the expansion in Lewisville out towards Ace Lane and Valley Parkway, Chief Tittle feels like we need to move that location a little more central to improve the response time. So we'll talk about that next week. That would be only for the station. The land will already be purchased by the time we get to that point. And then the next one is City Hall, the basement. When we built this building, we left the basement unfinished. And so now tonight we are going to talk about that. We're going to go ahead and we figured we could do a tour of the basement tonight. So while it would be fresh on your mind, we're just going to go ahead and do talk that project through before we talk about the financing issues. And then the City of Lewisville Fleet Maintenance Facility, right now we have fleet maintenance kind of located in a couple of locations. Fire work on their equipment out of Station 7, and then the rest of all of the fleet is maintained out on Keeley Street. So this would put them all in one location where we could get the equipment and everything that they need all together, share resources, make it a lot more efficient. We'll talk about that again next week. So we really want to talk about City Hall basement today and why we need to do this, what we're looking at. So you know, City Hall was built in 2003. The basement was left unfinished, always with the goal that when we needed the space that we could finish the basement out. There's 15,880 square feet down there. We'll, as soon as after we hear Gina and Brenda, we'll go down and we'll give you the map so you can kind of look and visualize what it's going to look like. Staff has identified some of our current needs and our future needs and what would make most sense for expansion of personnel here at City Hall. So we need additional conference space, additional training space. We're gonna take a little tour. On the way to the basement, we're gonna stop and look at our training room that we have right now. James lost his, he had a studio at the annex, and when we moved here, that was gobbled up for office space. So right now, when they need to produce cable programming, they're having to look for a space. They no longer have a sound room, so if they wanna, even with James' great voice, picks up some background noise, they would have a soundproof room down to do that function. And training and testing space would be downstairs, and just a limited number of offices. Now, the great thing about the basement space is it gives us an opportunity to use it for dual uses. The second thing we would want to use it for is an emergency operations center. And so it could function as both of those things. You know, an emergency operations center is something that you really never want to use, but if you need one, you better have one. So, you know, it's nice when you can find a facility that doubles and you can get good use out of the space when you're not having an emergency. So we'll talk a little bit about each one of the issues that we face here at City Hall. First one is just training space. We have 742 full-time positions, and you know, we have employees that do, as you know, a multitude of different things. So there's a lot of training needs. Right now, we have a training room in HR that comfortably seats 15 people set around tables. We can line chairs up and maybe get 25 where you have with nowhere to sit and ride on. We also use the Hedrick House for our leadership training, and we can fit 25 to 30 comfortably around a table, and then we use the community room. But those are often booked way in advance by citizens, so we have to compete for that space. And it's really difficult to do. You know, we, every few years, we want to do harassment training for all employees or cultural diversity training for all employees. And it's really difficult to train 742 people, 25 people at a time.
Yeah.
So we often we try to use the council chambers, but again, there's nowhere to take notes or write, you know, it's just chairs. So when we look at the space allocation, you will see that one end of the facility would be set up to where we could train 100 people. We also test. When we do a police test or a fire test, we often get 100 to 200 applicants. So we beg, borrow, and steal. We've tested at churches. We've unfortunately shut down the art center before by using the black box, the recital room, testing throughout it. So we're always looking for space. So we'll talk a little bit look at that a little bit.
I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to know, well, I don't know if this has been done, but is the MGM grant used for something else, but like for meeting? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Vegas.
Going to Vegas.
In March.
Vegas there for a minute.
Yeah, in March. But is it used for anything else, like training or anything, or meetings of you guys?
Heavily used.
Is it?
It's very difficult for us to get on the calendar.
Okay.
And we really hate to take up their space for something that we're a better use
Right.
from the community. So we try not to use it unless we just absolutely have to.
Okay.
For an example, Nebraska Furniture came in, when was that, James? A month and a half ago, 2
It
months
was
ago?
in November.
And had their job fairs at the MCL.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were so successful at the MCL, they booked them again, came
Wow.
out. But
That's good.
that brings revenue into the city.
Yeah.
Sleep Experts has all their quarterly sales staff training sessions at MCL Grant.
Oh, good.
They started in 2011 and they now book us a year at a time.
Oh, wow.
And the same thing with the community room. It's very, we use that for voting. So there's big chunks of time that it's not available. And then the Hedrick House, we have to plan at least a year in advance to be able to put our leadership classes in there. Also, conference rooms. This building has a number of conference rooms, and the thought is we're better off to move those conference rooms to the basement than to relocate offices to the basement. So it's more convenient for citizens when they need to access city personnel. So right now on the first floor, We have a finance conference room, although poor Brenda has already had to make that smaller. She's already added 2 offices to her area. We have the city manager's conference room that seats 8 people. So those could be transitioned, repurposed into offices as over the years as we grow. The second floor, there's 3 additional conference rooms, each seat 8 people. Those can be, that along with some larger hallways, different spaces, we can develop some offices. And we will not repurpose this. Obviously, this will always be here for council to use. And then community development has a large conference room upstairs where they do their development meetings, very convenient to engineering, and that conference room won't be repurposed. We think we can get up to 15 additional offices just with the conference room space, and that should take us way into the future, because if you think about who's housed here, our administrative staff does not grow that quickly. So we'll look at some space. Now, the Emergency Operations Center, I don't know how familiar you are with what that is, but the City of Lewisville, we've done mitigation analysis, and there's a lot of things that could happen to the City of Lewisville from, obviously, we're in Tornado Alley, droughts.
Earthquakes now.
Earthquakes. We've had some just straight line winds before that have blown trees down, blocked the roads, and when that happens, then we have to draw on all of our resources, public works, to fire and police. And right now, and we have a responsibility to our citizens to handle that efficiently. We have a plan for all of those functions, operations plan with annexes to deal with whatever might happen to the City of Lewisville. We have to keep current, we have to train on that, make sure that when that happens, that we're prepared to react and to deal with it. Right now, our Emergency Operations Center is a dual-purpose room again. It's located at Central Fire Station. It's their training room. It seats about 25 people, 30 people max. The reason the basement would obviously be an ideal location is because it would be hardened against wind and storm damage. Another real concern, as I mentioned, that public safety dispatch communications for police, fire, and ambulance services is located on the 2nd floor of the annex. One of the biggest threats would be some damage to that facility where they couldn't dispatch police and fire. The design of the EOC would allow them to pick up, literally, the consoles are in a suitcase, get them from DENCO 911, come down to the basement, and they could literally dispatch for long periods of time, months if they needed to, from that location. Here is the fire training room, so you kind of get a picture. All of this equipment is kept in boxes, one for each function, and when we do activate the EOC, we go and kind of reposition the furniture. It's very crowded, if you can imagine. What happens in the EOC actual room, obviously you're going to have police officers out handling traffic concerns, or depending on what the circumstance is, you could have public services out clearing the roads. You're going to have fire responding to emergencies. What happens in the actual EOC is the logistics of it all. We need to make sure that we are able to call in extra employees to get them help, that we can notify the public of what's happening, keep them abreast, keep the media informed what's going on, if we need to come up with sheltering, if we need to get resources from the county, the state, the federal government. All of that's happening in the EOC, so from finance to purchasing. So there's a number of people that would be in a full-scale operations center.
Which that setup right there is not full operational.
I know, that's just the best we can do with what we have. We have some phones that are dedicated that we can pull out, plug in. We've added additional phone lines, but it's a sad comparison to what a lot of the other cities have done. We visited both City of Richardson and the City of Plano have freestanding EOC facilities. This is Plano's, you can see. Now, both of them have since they use it for training, because again, you
You're
know,
not gonna have disasters.
yeah, you can't really just have a building sitting there without use. But what you can see, you have, for an EOC, you need several conference rooms. You've got your policymakers, your council. You need them separated because they might be in a situation where they're making some tough decisions. You've got your press. So James's studio will double as a place if we need to do press briefings. We can move them into the studio, do whatever we need to do. And then you have just all of the logistic groups working together. The big training room will be a dual purpose. We can separate a little further apart where you're not talking over each other because everybody will have their own function. So again, our EOC training room will serve as a dual presentation space. Most of the time, I hope 100% of the time, it will be used for training. But in the event of an emergency, it very quickly could transition to an EOC. The space can accommodate up to 100 people. When we go down, you will see that we're gonna have to work around some poles. We've incorporated those to kind of help us. We're gonna have some movable walls, so we can partition it off into 3 smaller rooms if need be, or we can open it up for one big room for 100 people. This space would also be available to rental to the public. So if we, there could be a source for maybe a little revenue there. Because it would, there's not a lot of, I don't know if you've ever had to look for a space for a large group. It's very difficult to find. The facility will also have a training room set up with computers. 12 computers will be set up. That will also be very functional in the EOC. They will always be updated, have the latest software. There will be a generator that would run that in the case of a power outage. So that could be used for us when we need to get resources, coordinate with other agencies, other jurisdictions, to coordinate with our own people. So it's a dual purpose. Right now, we just move computers around when we're trying to do computer training, so it would be much more efficient to have them set up where we can just do our ongoing training. Then we will have additional office space. Again, that will double for the police dispatch if we needed to relocate them. We would have a nice area where we could relocate them, where they could completely seamlessly start dispatching from the basement. There will be 5 conference rooms available with seating capacity of 10 to 20 people each. And then again, we talked a little bit about James's broadcast studio with the small soundproof recording booth. And then there will be an additional generator added, which will not just run the basic, but provide enough power that we could maintain operations for a longer period of time if need be. This is the proposed design. When we go down, I'm going to give each one of you a map so that you can kind of see what we're looking at. Right here, this is the large training area. The poles are located.
Whoops, she touched it.
I did.
This is after we turn the lights off. This is what it will look like.
There you go.
There you go.
There you got it. So I won't stand so close. How about that? So this is the computer training room, and it will have glass walls. So if in the event of an emergency, they can see what's going on. Makes communication much easier. This conference room also will have a glass wall so that if we did have an emergency, the policy group could be in here, and you could communicate easier. And then all of these conference rooms will be, they will all have video conferencing, so very multi-purpose. I will have a small break room with a microwave, refrigerator. Yes, ma'am, did you have a question?
Consideration of a movable wall between any of these to make one room any bigger?
This, on these, I do not think we put a movable wall in there to make them
It's just in the
bigger.
big room.
Just in the big room, now, which we could use as a conference room. We could separate this off if we needed to.
But those smaller ones, even if there was even between any 2 of them, you would end up having one more big room.
Absolutely, we
Like
can
we have a
obviously
density
talk.
thing.
Yeah, thinking in those terms.
So then you have some additional office space with some storage. And then we have a women's and men's locker room. And then all of this color is all of the kind of creams things that we have to have for mechanical, electrical. This is James' studio with his little soundproof room. This is the dispatch area where we could dispatch, but we can also use that for office space. So after Gina and Brenda talk about some of our funding options, we'll take the map, we'll go downstairs, look around, and then next week we'll go over all the projects, so we can, any questions you have, we can talk about next week, or if you have any right now, I'm glad to, yes.
My question is getting back to when the fire department leaves that corporate and 121 location, what is going to become of that building?
There's several different uses. I mean, we will look and see what the best use would be. There is a fuel island there, and that fuel island will remain there because we have them located throughout the city so that police and fire and public works, they can get fuel there without having to drive back to the central location. So it will be a city facility. We'll just have to look at what the best use would be.
Because if I'm thinking right, that's over there where we have a lot of,
7-Eleven.
and all the in-town suites and budget suites, some of the questionable areas. I'm thinking maybe putting like a police substation there.
Storefront.
Yeah, storefront was really, curtail a lot of that activity that's going on over there.
You know, if you think about it, and Chief Kerbo will be here next week, but really and truly, it's such a misnomer to think that police officers work out of a building. They come to briefing, and then they get in their car, and we can look, they're out in their district, and we get much more bang out of our buck for them driving around in their car. They're much more likely to see something happen. If they're sitting in a building, really, they're just waiting for somebody to come to them, and usually the people that are coming to them are not the ones that need to be seeing them.
But I'm just saying, even with the presence or the thought that, that's a police station there, that's just like sometimes if you're driving up and down the highway, they sometimes just sit a police car, and it's not even manned, it's just there, and you automatically start slowing down. So I'm just thinking, even if they just...
You're not going the speed limit already?
No, I'm not, I'm on it.
One of the very difficult things about storefronts, it was very popular, and it's not so popular now because you have to man them. If you're gonna say this is a police, you need to set people in there to make it available. And that's additional personnel, and when you're looking at best use of those people, the best use of those people are out in the field, responding to your call so that you have a quicker response time, a faster response time. And so, I think a lot of people, we watch a lot of TV and we think that they respond from a building, that they're sitting there waiting for their call. But our city's divided up into districts, and then those districts are all divided into quadrants, and beats, and that's where they respond. They know what their area is, and we try to keep them in that area, so that helps keep that response time down. But obviously, if something big happens, then we pull from wherever we need. So, but it is definitely something that we're looking at, all the time, staffing, where does the most crime happen, where do we need to add districts, they can change those beats to fit the crime patterns. And
The building would definitely be repurposed. I will tell you, one need we have citywide is always storage. So there's a lot of different potential uses.
That was one of my questions here was, is there enough storage?
Well, when we go down there and you see what it's used for now, you're really gonna think that.
Because I know, being with the school district, to build these beautiful new schools, and 10 years later, we're all hunting for a cubby to put something.
You're absolutely right, Karen.
Is there enough
Well,
storage?
we have one, we do have, we have storage available at other locations in the city. We have a records facility that we're now we're paperless. HR's been paperless for several years, so the records that is becoming available. So we're looking at all of those options as we move down the road. You hate to take good space in this building and use it for storage. It's a disgrace when we go down there now, and my department is part of the problem. You'll see that we store everything down there. Yeah, James and I are both very, very guilty.
Just move every couple of years.
Yes.
I want to ask, of the 742 full-time positions, how many of those are like, I would say, administrative or managerial positions? Do you know?
Managers and directors, we have about 50.
Okay. But just administrative Regular desk job?
Clerical, well, this
Clerical.
building has about 100 people in it.
Okay,
And of those 100, you have all the inspectors that are out.
yeah.
So I can get that information for you if you would like it. Off the top of my head, we probably have about 25 clerical or technical clerical that do, we have really no secretaries anymore.
Right.
But you know that we have permit technicians, we've got some finance technicians, HR has technicians, one does payroll, one does, so they all have functions, but they're definitely administrative functions.
Yeah.
But,
I was just curious.
police and fire make up the majority of those employees.
Okay.
Police officers, there's 230, I think, about sworn police officers.
Okay.
Fire has about 130.
Okay.
And then you've got public works, the parks and the maintenance people that are in the field
Okay.
that make up the majority of those,
Okay.
yeah, that do the actual work.
Okay.
We're just here to support them.
Okay. Yeah, I was just asking because I know, for some reason, government, as far as buying buildings and space, is being less and less. And as in federal government, we're now required to telework because we don't have enough parking, enough cubes or anything. So we have to share a cube, share a parking space, mainly because a lot of the federal or defense property is prime property.
Right.
And so like downtown, we have nowhere to go. So they're moving us by Love Field. But we have no parking. There's not even enough parking for the airport. So they're requiring us to telework because we have nowhere to park. Yeah, so that was one thing I was wondering, if
Yeah,
something
we're very,
city
very
government was
lean
going
when
to
you
that.
look at our staffing compared to other cities, and there's a lot of people that would like to telecommute, but unfortunately, almost every administrative person has a function of dealing with the public or supporting someone in an office, supervising or whatever, so they almost have to be on site to do their job.
We actually have a telework policy, but we've used it one time.
One
I
time, we
think,
had an accountant, I think, that did it a little bit, but it's really difficult, you know, we don't have many positions that have no interaction with people, you know, we deal with counters, we deal with citizens when they walk in, and then we deal with our employees, so it makes it difficult. Anybody, yes, sir?
Couple of questions. So what would happen to this space if this was to move out?
That's their training room, so every day, they do, so in the fire
That's a
department,
central fire station.
that's where they do all their CE
So that would
for, yeah, that would,
Okay.
yeah, they'll, in fact, the only time you see it set up like that is when we're having a drill, or a lot of time during the spring when there's a storm, they'll get it set up if we're, you know, depending on the tornado, what's going on.
Soft opening.
Yeah.
Another question, have you taken into consideration any update to IT equipment or anything you need?
That's all included in the budget
It
and
is,
the
okay.
cost of those projects.
So it'll be fully furnished, all the IT,
Yeah,
everything will be.
when you looked at the price of all of the project,
in.
it includes the monitors, in fact, the training room, it's almost overkill, so that you can see from everywhere. The video conferencing, it brings the latest technology.
Artwork?
No artwork yet so far, but I was listening to that, and I was thinking that was really cool.
Etching in the glass.
Absolutely. Or maybe
Please get them a couple of trash cans to put in.
maybe out on the lawn, James could put something.
Close to
What
the
else
side.
idea?
I was gonna say, there's a nice slab
That's what I
there.
was thinking.
Yeah. Then the last question, security. What type of security would you have? I mean, obviously, this is open to the public for the most part.
This is open to the public. We do have several areas that are badged in for only employees. Like right now, finance is badged in. These doors can be locked down. The basement right now is secured by a key. Mr. Backus has got the key so we can go down and look. So I'm sure we will badge that so that employees have badge access. It's kind of scary right now when you go down there because you just never know, you
What's
know.
gonna jump out?
Yeah, but you can see the pretty stairs go down, but then it just ends, so.
So if you guys badge downstairs, that's gonna be hard for your public, I mean,
Well, we'll just have to,
How do
you,
There'd
I
be a
mean, you can
supervisor
set
to
it,
do that.
You point
No,
out.
we've never
Yeah.
rented a facility without someone being.
yeah.
oh, okay.
It's just like this building, sometimes it's used in the third floor can be rented, so we just make sure there's staff here to let them in and out. and
Oh,
deal with
okay,
it. So,
okay, yeah.
There's always staff at a city facility if it's rented.
Okay, good.
The best thing, Melinda said this earlier, about using the basement for an EOC operation, is that it is a hardened facility. And if you look at the Plano, and I think the Richardson too.
Either one of them will harden.
I thought Richardson had a room.
They had
that spent
extra money, they
Yeah,
put
lots
some,
of money.
yeah.
Create a hardened, safe, secure room.
Now, is it considered hardened because it's a basement, or was it something extra built into it?
Because it's basement.
Because I remember one time we were here with the Neighborhood Preservation
And
Committee.
Steve had to break in.
Breaking the.
Well, no, the weather was getting bad. You remember when the weather was getting bad, and so we had to go downstairs. I was like, hey, well, I know I need to come to
Steve actually had
now.
to break in the door.
Oh, you did break in the door on that?
Somebody put a new lock on, so Eric and
Now, did you pick the lock, or did you break the lock?
I broke the lock. I was younger back then.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah, and Gina and Brenda to do, soon you guys are gonna be looking at prioritizing your project. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes revisiting where we are as far as the total, presentation at this point, for all projects, all categories, and then compare that to funding sources.
So this is the total amount of project requests, and I'm kind of going to go through this a little bit. Brenda is going to give us more information on bonds and whatever else she may can help us, whatever questions you have. The street projects that we have listed here are 103 million, and those are the ones you've already gone through. You're kind of familiar with all of those. Plus, on this chart, we've added the 406,000, which would be 2% of the thoroughfare streets. So not all streets. The residential type neighborhoods, we wouldn't add an art piece in somebody's neighborhood. But the corporate drive, some of the bigger ones, we might put something somewhere there. So that's the 406,000 that you see there. That makes up the $104 million worth of street projects. Drainage, we have the 72 million that you've actually seen. We don't have an art component there, as you probably wouldn't really see art down a drainage ditch of some sort. Parks and trails, we did add 2% to the total amount of parks and trails because that would be something you would like to see in parks and trails. And then facilities that Melinda just went over, we've got the 25 million. And where she said they didn't really add art to the basement or anything, we did add a 2% here. If we wanted to do something outside of this building somewhere, it's included in this number on this sheet. So that differs a little bit from what you saw on her sheet.
Before you move on, I've noticed up in Keller recently that when they're doing sort of their drainage projects, they're like, instead of raw concrete, they're facing it with stone. Would that be considered art, or would that just be part of the budgetary process?
Part of the budgetary process, I think. I don't think that would be art. Eric, do you have an opinion on that?
It's kind of like James was saying, it's all aesthetics and streetscape, murals, it's art, but it's probably not as direct, it's an indirect facade that would look better than just block concrete. You see that some in Castle Hills, and the embankment walls,
Yes.
they texture those, or they stain it, or they use some of the form liners out there instead of just raw concrete, so it's more of an aesthetic treatment, I would think, than art.
Okay.
So you can see here that that's $280 million worth of projects that you've kind of already gone through and are going to go through the rest of them next week with the facilities. Write the check.
Write the check.
Well, the total sources of all of our funding sources that we've kind of talked about with you as we've gone along a couple of times amount to just under 177 million. And that would be assuming just a level debt rate. We have talked before about what if we did a 1%, and we've even included here a 2-cent rate and a 3-cent rate. So you can see at 77 million in geo bonds would be assuming the level debt rate. 89.1 would get you a 1-cent tax rate increase. 101 million would get you a 2-cent, and then you would get 113 million if we wanted to go to a 3-cent tax rate increase. And Brenda, you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, you can just count on about 12 million for every penny that you wanted to add to the tax rate. And this is just the INS rate, which is currently at a little 11.7 cents. The total tax rate, just to remind you all, is just under 45 cents. So there's 32 cents that goes to the general fund, and then almost 12 cents that goes to payroll.
Help me here. We had numbers last week showing an increased population, so increased buildings. Would that increased buildings generate more money because there's more structures being taxed?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. Does
Absolutely.
this number reflect the 111 population or 100?
This is current.
We
This is
increase.
current.
Yeah, when we try to be conservative, because as you well know, in 2009, we saw property tax values go down. So what we try to do is, for the next 10 years, we position this with a 2% increase of, just a modest 2% increase over those 10 years, and then flat thereafter, because we are gonna reach a point where we are built out, so to speak. But we have seen a lot bigger increases than 2%, but we've also seen some decreases, so.
What it wouldn't include, I think, maybe what you were asking, we talked about this whole area with Castle Hills. Those values are not included.
Okay. But they would generate income, should they sell it?
Absolutely.
Correct.
Absolutely.
If you took a 10-year average, that 2% is pretty much where we are, or not?
I think 2% were at right around 3% increase. So we,
2 is conservative still.
yeah,
I'd rather be conservative.
yeah. And
The,
keep in mind, if the Castle Hills does come on board, while it may bring, it will bring us additional money, they have their own debt that the city would have to absorb and use for a lot of that property tax value that comes on.
Which you is taken into account as you look at these numbers.
Right.
All right.
This is assuming that.
the 4.2 million for hotel motel fund, is that's not just a park for the arts, right?
Well, it is, because the only projects that we have right now are arts funding. So that would be the available balance that you would be able to use on arts projects. You wouldn't use all of that, obviously. I think it totaled to 2.4 if you did everything on here would be.
Say again?
That 2.4 million from the first sheet was the total of all arts at 2%, and we aren't gonna fund all of that, but.
Right.
Gina, that's the hotel motel fund balance, is it not?
It is,
Fund balance.
yeah. So, but the only there's not really a separate project that you could use that for. We had a couple preliminarily, but. So then, we've got the general fund cash balance, and we've put the entire fund balances here that are available. We would not recommend that you plan on utilizing the entire fund balance from any one fund. I think as we've talked about that a couple of times, we've said, there are plenty of other uses besides bond projects that we like to use that reserve money for. But we do have 12.2 in the general fund. Our bond analysis on 4B fund shows that in fiscal year 2024, you could issue 25.9 million in bonds, and that's the 9th year of our 10-year plan. So that is something you could take into consideration here. 4B cash right now, between now and the next 10 years, you have about 12.7 million in cash. The stormwater fee, assuming both cash and the debt combination that we've talked about, would give you about 33.8 million. Hotel motel fund, that's the total cash balance right now at 4.2. Utility fund cash, we included in bonds. Utility fund we included here for the first time. You haven't really seen anything on utility fund. We included it here because part of the fleet building that Melinda will talk with you about next week houses and works on our utility fund vehicles as well. So they could contribute to that as well. What percentage that is, could be a 50-50 split, it could be something a little bit different, but you do have that to be able to help with that building.
Remember, those are revenue bonds, and revenue bonds do not go to the voters. Council.
Regarding the 4B bond for 2024, can that be allocated ahead of time, prior accrual for, you utilize ahead, it's gotta wait till.
We're paying off existing debt right now,
That's
and it won't be
okay.
paid off until then, so you can't issue more, you don't have the revenue to back the bonds until the existing debt is gone.
Okay.
And when the park board looked at that, I think you guys took that into account.
Yeah.
You had that,
We did.
those projects laid out by years.
Yep.
And so you saw like a rec center coming on in that year, that's when you were selling that debt.
Yep, that's what I just wanted to double check.
So this would show, even, this would be about $100 million short of being able to fund everything we had on our list if we left it at a level. If you went all the way to a 3% rate increase, you're still looking at a deficit of about 65 million. So this is where the prioritization process is gonna become very important. You can see the list we've given you and the amount of money is not enough to fund it.
And did I understand you to say while the 12.2 from the general fund is listed there, it's really not prudent to spend it? So in essence, it's untouchable.
I think you can spend a portion of it, you know, you might look at a project out of it, but I would not want you to do the whole 12.2. So
What
that's something we
percentage
can
of
get
the
into.
total annual budget does 12.2 represent?
Of the total annual?
Ballpark, maybe.
Well, it's $70 million budget, so that's less than,
15%.
yeah, less than, yeah.
And
So,
that number she's showing you, just to be clear, that's your excess funds reserve. So what happens, by policy, we have to maintain a reserve, and that's now 20%.
it's, yeah, still 15% for, we haven't adopted the policy formally,
Oh, is
but
that, you're such on 50%?
yeah.
And so what we're showing you there is those dollars that are excess.
Above the
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in some ways, these are spendable,
You're spending.
because we still have the 20% push.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, there's a lot of other projects out there. When we talk to council budget, we talk about the technology plan that has lots of projects in the future. We always look to that fund balance for those technology type projects. But this is the way we funded Eric's animal shelter. It was funded in total with excess fund reserve, excess fund cash.
Yes.
It's his.
Do you get naming rights?
Every day.
Friday?
Different names on good days or bad days.
So this sheet is just showing you the different types of projects and the appropriate funding sources for those projects. You can go ahead and add the hotel motel balance to each of these to fund the arts portion. I put it on the facilities one and I neglected to put it on all of these, so. A large portion of that 4B cash could be used for parks and trails. The 4B bonds, again, you want to wait until 2024 to be able to do those, which would be the next year of the plan. The GEO bonds, again, that could be the 77 or the 89 or even the 101 or the 113 million, depending on how high you want to go with the tax rate. And then your general fund cash, again, I would use a small portion of that, not all of it, because I'm going to be more conservative. So.
Now, you're talking about the three different types of the tax rates. That has to go, is that a council decision, or would that have to go to a vote?
It would both. I mean, it would start at a council decision, a recommendation from you to the city council, and then the city council would decide whether or not they wanted to raise the tax rate to cover it. And then the bonds would be voted on by the voters.
Okay.
And I know we've
I wanted
talked
to be
about
clear on
it
that.
and have that information somewhere, in this multiple, the two big huge binders I have. What is the difference in our tax rate compared to two cities that are close with it, you know, Highland Village, Frisco, Grapevine, one of
Our
those
amount is
offhand?
also right at around 44 cents. We are slightly less than them, and we have been every year. Highland Village is quite a bit higher.
What about Denton? How do they compare
they're
us?
quite a
They're
lot
quite,
lower.
especially us.
We're the
after
second
November.
lowest in the
Did it change in
metroplex.
November?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
had
that
a,
didn't stop them from.
we had a graph on some of your,
Okay.
I can
Yeah.
pass this around if you wanna take a
So-
quick glance.
We knew it was in the
Okay,
binder. We
yeah,
just
yeah.
shouldn't-
Yeah, it's in one of the pages, one of your books.
That's it. I
I think-
remembered seeing this.
Well-
Okay.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is like-sized cities, and also we think about mature cities, like, even though we're young, as, we're still pretty mature compared to some of those that are close to us.
Very much so.
Okay.
Like fun and great.
Sure.
So for the parks and trails, we've gone over the appropriate sources there. Drainage projects, one of the options would be establishment of a stormwater fee, which again, we don't have right now, so that would be something that would be a recommendation from you. General fund cash has been something we've used in the past, as well as GEO bonds.
And the stormwater fee, that was from $4 up to $6.25.
Right. Started
Over
at
how
4.
many years?
10.
10 years.
We do listen.
Very good. Some money.
We do listen.
The streets projects, again, that's 104 million. Your geo bonds can go from the 77 million up to 113 million, just depending on what you want to recommend. General fund cash is also an option there, and then you would have your hotel motel fund to help pay for any art portion that you wanted. Facilities projects, again, could be geo bonds, or they could be miscellaneous fund balances, including your general fund and your utility fund that I talked a little bit about, your hotel motel fund for the arts portion, and then utility bond, revenue bonds are the other thing that we would probably do to help offset the cost of the fleet building.
Just the fleet building?
Just the fleet,
Okay.
because that's really utilized by our utility fund
Okay.
workers and vehicles, so that's a legitimate use of that source of funding. And Melinda will go over kind of that split on that building a little bit.
So we just
This
wanted
helps.
to go over that information again, and be prepared for your good job of bringing the project.
Is there a general recommendation given to cities our size as far as how much to increase the tax rate? Is it like generally, you say generally 1 cent or 3%?
It's not in general.
It's just opinions, okay.
We gave you those options, basically, I think Denton just did a 3 cent, and
Right.
so that was something that's relevant to the area, and, in the past, we've given council options of 1 and 2 cents, and
Okay.
they've never taken them.
Oh.
Historically, the bond overshoot council has supported the passage of the program by saying it's not gonna result in tax increase. You can actually, and that's that 77 million, you can actually go out and you can approve these projects and it's not gonna impact your tax rate. And that's been a selling point in the past. That's been the approach.
Or we could go out and do better,
Or you can go out and do better.
And make
and that could be our
commitments.
selling point, is that we could actually do better.
But see, I like what you said though, like you said, council never has approved anything like 2 or 3% in the past? Okay. Because, my point is, we can take it to them, if they say no, then they'll never get on the ballot.
It's a council decision.
So that's something
And
we
we're doing it
definitely
at the
gotta
same
put in the
time at the
record.
next election, do I remember that correctly?
No.
Council
No.
election?
No.
No.
It'd be
We would
the,
look at November.
okay, alright, gotcha. That's right, we have May and then
That is
November.
something.
As Amanda says, though, maybe we need to take the stance that a lot of people want Lewisville to change, and maybe the only way to get us to change is 1%, 2%, or 3%.
It's, the reality of that is probably a 2% or 3%, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, to see a substantial change and,
But that may be the point we have to sell.
It'll have to be a good sale. That's just like going into a boss and saying, I really, really deserve, a raise of 2, 3, 4, 5%. And you can sell, you can say, I did this and this is what I've done for the past year, but at the end of the day, it's still up to that boss what they give you. And so that's why, to me, that's important, if they've never approved a 2 to 3%. So
And
this is an uphill
I
battle.
don't know that the last Blue Ribbon Committee recommended an increase, do you?
I don't think
That
they
council, opposed. I think, a recommendation from you will be taken as a recommendation, and I think they'll weigh that seriously. So I think whatever y'all are comfortable with, you should do, regardless of what maybe has happened in the past.
You know what
The
I'd like to point out?
2025 initiative will carry a lot of weight with the council.
That's what I was going to say, because the majority of the council members, they understand that, yeah, they understand what we've been screaming and hollering about, and, I mean,
but there could also be change in our council by then as well.
That's the key.
yeah, but I
Which
don't,
could be good or bad,
Could
But-
affect us either way.
right?
That's the key.
I would like to point out that
Some
the
could be
last
good.
time we had the Blue Ribbon Committee, cities around us were very different as well. And we've seen them sort of
Right.
raise the game.
Right.
And many cities, Irving, Flower Mound, Dallas,
so we do have a
around and
city
around and around.
council.
And we've
Frisco's
seen
grown
what,
exponentially since the
In
last.
May?
and we've seen what they've done. And I know very few people that dislike it.
well,
Right.
And
they're
it,
gonna
you know,
win, so we're not gonna have
it's
any
not, we have something to point to now.
Well, I like it when I hear, oh, wow, they really did it nice, or, they did something, and then start to complain, and it's like, well, yeah, but you know, they also pay for that, so if you want it nice, you're gonna have to pay for it.
Yeah, that's, I mean, we had that conversation early on, this committee, talking about, you know, at some point, we represent the constituents, and it's time for us, if, we have to say, hey, we need to invest in this community. If we wanna be that, you gotta invest to do that. I mean, if you wanna just continue to place a little paint on a particle board that's gonna continue to fail, we can do that. Or we can say, you know what, we're gonna find something that's more sturdy and more, you know, that's gonna be more durable. That's opposed to doing streets with asphalt or streets with concrete. I mean, we know the long-term effects, and a thing that we haven't even talked about is, you know, what are gonna be the economic effects in this investment over the next, although it's only 10 years, over the next 20 or 30 years if we make this investment now, because it's only gonna get more expensive.
Or longer.
Or longer.
Yeah, because materials and stuff gets expensive as well.
But we have all had the advantage of sitting at this table.
Yeah.
The average voter, the average person that gets to say has not had the advantage of seeing all of this. So, because I mean, I go home and my husband says, well, what'd you talk about tonight? Well, did you look at this? And he's read through some of this stuff. And he's like, wow, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, yeah, that needs to be done. Oh. And it's enlightening for him. But the average person doesn't have access to that same information.
Well, they have access to it, it's all online.
Well, exactly, but we have to point them to it.
Sure, yes.
Then you're gonna have
I
to
do
clip
that,
it.
I do that
Exactly.
regularly on.
One conversation that will come to you shortly. In most cities, and historically in our city, if a blue ribbon committee recommends a bond package and council chooses to put that bond package for the voters, the blue ribbon committee, either in whole or in part, often becomes an advocacy group, because Texas electioneering law says we as a city can say, hey, voter Eric, here's what's available to you, here's what we want to build, here's what the cost is going to be. We can't say, but here's why you ought to vote for it. We can't say,
Vote yes.
even sometimes just saying what the impact would be, if we build this, it'll reduce response times. Some cities have gotten the wrist slap or worse because that's electioneering. A private group can electioneer. So there will be a conversation coming to you at some point. If you go down that path and council goes down that path with you, there's things that you might be asked to do in that role. And certainly I can offer you some input on what has happened with other cities successfully. But a lot of that work is going to be outside of the city hall walls.
Do we
Has to be.
We have to sell it.
Do we know a city that is built out as much as Lewisville and probably around the same age as Lewisville and with the same or similar population that's near here?
Richardson.
Richardson, okay. I think I want to do some research with them, because see, I wouldn't want to go to a voter and compare it to Grapevine or Flower Mound when, like Eric said, basically they build a road, everything is new.
Yeah. What's Garland like?
Garland's larger than us, significantly larger than us, and older.
Much older.
But Richardson is a,
I think Richardson's a very comparable city, their tax rate.
okay.
Brenda, do you have your sheets on?
Yeah, they were. Richardson
Me
was-
personally, I don't think we'll have
they're not
any
on.
issues getting it, getting it to pass.
What about
Because if
cities outside?
if I the same people that come out and vote, that come out and vote all the time.
I think it depends on the rate.
We'll get it, we'll get it.
But I would look at large.
Yeah, it's the same people that come, that keep our same city councilmen and mayor, and it's gonna be the same people that come and vote, and it's probably the same people that's going 20, participate in 2025, so I don't think it'll be.
Yeah, they're all
I come from the school side, and I'm telling you, I anticipate we will have very aggressive, very well-funded opposition to this.
Similar to.
You think so?
Simply, I run into it every school race I've ever been in.
On the Houston.
They will come out, and the money won't come from our community, but they will flood this community with mailers. They will pay for speakers. There's a a whole very organized
That's why I
groups out
said,
there.
Is it because we're gonna be asking for a tax increase?
Yes.
Groups that are posting
It depends on
any
the
tax increase whatsoever
Why I want
and will
Richardson.
aggressively fund it.
Three
Aggressively
cents,
fund
okay.
it. So I
63
anticipate
cents.
we will be facing
There were.
a very well-funded, very well-organized opponent.
Really?
Exactly.
I anticipate.
This is not gonna be easy.
No.
It's
What
not
is it?
gonna be.
Well, where was that opposition when Carl Kyer was, no, I'm kidding, running for school
But
board?
here's a different bird. We had two sales tax elections in the early nineties that were both defeated for that very reason. We got a group that
Really?
opposed it, yes.
And if you, from my point of view, I work regionally, and you'll see the same exact postcard with a slightly different print. Same format, you just know they changed the title. And it's, you know, it's a variation on a theme, just vote no, just say no, and they will flood the
So we're
market.
gonna have to match that, basically, as best we can.
Well, I don't know how deep your pockets are, mine aren't very deep, so, but I've got a big mouth.
So how would they get
Well, that-
wind of
I mean, that's
this?
other-
I mean,
other avenues.
because, because
Council-
we're out now
Council
and,
will vote,
Right.
and then it's a public issue. And then the city's hands are tied. They can't counter the negative PR. These guys can't say anything at that point. Even if it's half-truths and lies, they can't say, wait a minute, that's not right. Because the election is called. So I anticipate, will have these half-truths and lies. And they will spin the numbers to make it look as if this is the most outrageous Aladdin-style dream that any city's ever come up with in Texas.
well,
And you
can
do-
we ask for donations?
Yes.
We can? Okay, because I've helped with several school board campaigns and city council campaigns, so we need to get money, right? To deal with
Jerry can
this.
to this better than I can, but you can form a political action committee.
Send
You
her out.
could raise
Gather
funds.
money.
Okay, because that's what, I mean, obviously, I do believe you, but if that's the case, and like I said, I've been on very successful campaigns helping out, we're gonna need money. We're gonna need donations.
And we're gonna have to just be creative. Like,
Yeah,
really,
we have to do
diligent.
car washes
Oh, yeah,
and
that's the
sell
point.
candy.
So,
So, do y'all wanna
Car
take just a
washes.
couple minutes break before we go on a tour?
I'm
Everybody ready to go?
fine.
I'm ready to go. My dinner starts after the tour.
Sure, 1 second, guys. If I can get everybody to catch up in a second.
There was a conversation at the last meeting about wanting a tour of the projects. And I
Yes.
just need to get back to that to see if there is an interest and if you thought about if if you wanna do it on a Saturday, if you wanna do it during a weekday. I just need some direction.
I think some of us kind of bounced it around and were thinking more towards a Saturday. Did I hear that correctly?
What month, February or March?
I take off.
What month would it have to be?
I can look that up.
February?
That's why I say either day is
Because
fine.
February 26th.
Oh, what about President's Day? Are y'all open President's Day?
It just can't be February 15th because that's my birthday.
Well, why can't it?
What do you
Because that's been my birthday.
We'll sing to you.
February what?
February?
16th
Is it 16th?
is the President's
But
Day.
that's a Monday. You say everybody's working, so.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not,
I'm
I
working
can do it
that
on,
day.
Oh, yeah, it is.
yeah, I can do it on the
I don't know if I'm
16th.
there or not, but
I will.
I can probably make that happen.
That would be a
It's
hard
just
day for
something
me.
I'm through with.
Derek, you
Because
working?
that's a serious work day.
Yes, I'm working that day, but if the group's off, I can get off.
Because if the
I don't
kids
wanna
aren't in
cost
school, we
anybody
get
money.
it hard.
It won't
We
cost
get
me.
labs and we
Either
have
one.
places that are always full of children that we
Monday
don't
or
have.
Saturday.
Automatic? The technology? What's up with technology?
We go in and we'll go in and we'll tear a lab down and rebuild it that day.
No. All right, is Lewisville school out? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just thought about you when you was thinking.
So we get the 16th, is that the day? Is that consensus?
Either Saturday or Monday is fine with me, either day.
Okay,
I have 3 labs to rebuild on the 16th. There's no way my body's gonna be anywhere but there.
February 14th?
I'll be out of town. I'll be in
By the time my
I'll be in
fast is
San
over, I'm
Antonio,
eating pizza.
the 14th, 15th.
We actually have a
Important
council
food.
retreat on Valentine's Day
Oh,
before.
yeah, that
Yeah,
would be staying.
but it's during the day. I mean, you're not gonna go to.
Have you ever met my wife?
Well,
Oh, it's during the day?
No.
We're not going at night, you can't see anything at night.
I'm
eating all day.
I always tell people it's Valentine's Day in my house every day, so.
I
What day is
can
Valentine's on?
Saturday the
On
7th or
Saturday.
the 21st.
On Saturday, my birthday's
So I
Sunday.
know I can't do, I can't do.
No, we can do it on
this
Saturday, I'm gonna be out of town
21st
anyway.
works great.
21st?
21st.
21st works good for me,
I'm in.
I'm good.
February 21st.
21st?
you know?
Tentative.
Yeah, what's good for you? Just depends.
Is that on a Saturday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna need to understand exactly, do you just wanna see a mix of projects? Is that the interest? Or if there's specific projects you need to see, I need to know that too.
Well, I think as we get closer to it, then we'll be able to talk about our priorities. We can look at
Maybe
and
kind
focus
of
on the
majority
priorities.
of what we.
The priorities will drive
Good
where we wanna
point.
go, so the 21st looks good to me as well. So, will you send us the calendar invite, and then those that can, and as we get, we know we'll switch, but it's important that we have the majority of us there, and
Do you want a second date, just in case?
One was kinda short, let's see here.
Yeah, the window is very short.
When's the council retreat?
March 19th through the 21st.
So the 28th, the next weekend.
I can't do the 28th.
After your last meeting.
And your last meeting's the 26th.
Well, it's gonna either the 21st or bust.
What
There's
is
a lot
Amanda
going on
thinking
up here.
about? I can see your brain turning.
It never rests. It's an
It's a
unfortunate
curse.
curse.
Yeah, it's a curse,
Yes.
isn't it?
I can't
It's exhausting.
think of
Another
the,
day.
You know what?
no.
That's why I go to the.
I mean, without getting during the
It's the
week,
only
and
place
that
my
really
mind
gets
shuts
people.
off.
Mhm.
I get sort of overwhelmed with whatever's
Yeah,
up
any
there.
other,
Yep.
any day other than the 16th, any
Exactly.
weekday other than the
That's why I go.
16th does not bother me at all.
That's it.
I take day off.
Check
What
out.
about,
I have
what
59
about
days in
the,
my bank.
what about the 20th as a backup day?
The Friday, I'm in.
I'm in.
Yeah,
I mean,
Friday the day.
I'm on full Fridays.
Yeah.
That works for me too.
The
That works
20th is
for me.
better?
Yeah.
20th would be
20
better for
works.
me.
Yeah, it's usually, is that on Friday?
Yeah.
What about for the
We
city?
love that.
Let's say the 20th is first.
Yeah.
Yeah, 21st
First
is
would be
backup.
Okay.
That works for me.
But if you'll send us a calendar
like
invite,
that.
so we'll make sure everybody gets it on their calendar.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can pull that day off. I mean, that's no big deal.
What time were you thinking?
How long would we need?
How about
We're
before
gonna need
lunch? Let's just
probably-
knock it out, start your day.
We're gonna have today?
Well, let's say 9.
Oh, don't say no.
Like maybe 9, 9:30.
Oh, ma'am, at 8 o'clock, I'm popping my pillow and putting my.
On a Friday?
I
That'd be
think-
here.
At Friday?
I think anything beyond
No, if we start,
Back to school?
no,
Yeah, we don't wanna
my
do-
husband takes my daughter to school.
Yeah, but we don't wanna deal with school zones and all that kind of stuff.
To me, honestly,
Yeah.
11 o'clock would really be great. To start at 11.
See, I'd be happy to start at 7 and keep going.
Oh, no ma'am,
I'm a
7
morning-
o'clock, no.
That's
I'm a
like
morning
9. Let's not
And
go
I'm
before
there
9.
too. I'd rather get up
11
there
at
and
7, what
get
about
it
at
done.
9?
Let's go 9.
I can do 9 o'clock.
After
I can force myself at 9.
Yes, no.
Nine's on, that's what I've got on my
8.
calendar already, so.
Yeah, I think 9.
Oh, then it's done. Yeah.
Donna.
I'll put it in his calendar, it's.
Nine's good. That way,
It's been,
some of us can get to the office. Because I'll get to the office at 7:30 and I'll get some stuff done.
Does that
before we go.
constitute a
and
meeting?
9's perfect, 9's just fine.
So we have to have it posted if we meet some outside.
It's a posted
start.
meeting. The tour is a posted meeting.
Okay,
So anybody?
because I was thinking we need to start meeting to start
Somebody-
discussing
They can follow us in the car.
campaign donation fundraisers.
Well, that's a whole
That's-
process.
that's-
That would not take place in this room.
And then we wanna say for sure, whatever we wanna see, we gotta end it by 2 or 3.
Campaign,
Campaigning, and it would not
Yes, sir.
take place in this
fundraising
room.
Ray, I
donations.
agree.
It
Bob's
would not
already got
take
his
place in.
calendar.
I know, well, that's what I was asking, so if we meet outside of this room to talk about campaign, do we have to have that posted if we
We'll say
all meet
guaranteed
outside?
we'll be done in
You
person.
need a
Efficient.
meeting as a pack.
Yeah.
Ask your questions now.
Well,
Says
depends on how
committee
long we-
official.
Do we have to get like a
Teams we
certain,
have.
as a pack, we don't have to have a 501 or?
There's a form you fill out, actually, City Secretary's office could.
Did you know-
Did y'all hear that?
Okay,
It's
so
a
we-
campaign filing.
So we need to get that form. Okay.
So the very late, it'll be starting at 9 and the very latest will be 3. But we're really encouraging all of us to take a hard look and working with staff to try to end it by 2 o'clock.
Yes.
By 3?
By 2.
Yeah, I agree.
But we're gonna schedule it from
That
9
would
to
be
3.
efficient.
And better
Yeah.
on to rainy days.
Oh, man.
Are we gonna stop
Are y'all providing the bus for us? Okay.
Sack lunch. Bring your banana.
Are y'all getting donuts now? Okay.
Okay, are we ready to
Have
do it?
sandwiches.
Yeah, Jason's Deli's good.
You
We're
have
on
a
old
preference,
times.
turkey, roast beef, or ham?
You ready?
like something with the cookies. The cookie and the fruit.
2025.
Let's go quickly.
So let's start off, we'll look at HR, and then if there's stairs, if somebody would rather go on the elevator, Steve will meet us and we can go either way.
Are you leaving your stuff here?
Are y'all gonna lock
Carrying
the
all your
doors
stuff?
for the women
Yeah,
to leave our
I would leave my
purses?
stuff.
Okay.
Do we need to stop the tape?
I don't have to slow.
Steve went to
And
do
so,
it.
and so just for the viewing public, what we're doing is just walking down, we're not gonna have any votes or anything, we're just gonna take a tour of the facility downstairs. And then we'll come back and reconvene.
The video.
I second that.
We need to adjourn and reconvene?
No.
No, no,
No, because it's something you can't talk while you're down there.
Yeah.
Just be little mimes looking at the,
Okay, so no part.
and we couldn't talk either, just have to be walking. Like a kindergarten going to recess, in a straight line.
There we
I'll
go.
throw away my stuff.
I just don't like to clean up something.
That's what Eric did.
Well, we can start campaigning.
No, we're gonna need to form a pack.
I'm always scared to get locked down there. Bringing my phone.
Open it up.
Steve, where'd you come from?
Y'all be careful, I had to leave the recorder on because it clears. When I cut the recorder off, it clears everything. It won't start back over.
So it's recorded.
So, yeah, I'm going that way.
Yeah.
We'll just watch the room from
The outside.
Clear, it says record.
Huh?
It says record clear there.
Sun rays by one night. Yeah, there's a chance, but it's pretty.
first time this elevator worked, 2003. We held the door open and the sensors right, it stuck the elevator for an hour. The phone hooked up to the beat on the door.
It hasn't happened since then, right?
Well, no, it's happened a couple times, but you can stick a rod in there, stick a coat in there, and pull the thing to work. No lie. Oh, hurry up. Nobody wants to go?
No. No, it's not. Would probably say.
I was gonna say, sounds like it's probably not all that interesting. It's 20 after 8.
was just down there not too long ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right?
We already know where everything's at.
I know, that's right. We were fortunate enough to be able to put some in there.
Liquor tax money go, or the liquor sale.
I'm gonna run to the restroom since we got people.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Getting her running all that.
And just so you know, I will probably be late. I'm traveling next week and coming back on Thursday. And so depending upon what time I land and then how I get through traffic to get here, because I'm supposed to be back, I think about 5 something, so, but I'll get here whenever we touch down and I get there.
Make those.
All right, so
This burned in,
29.
right next to the memory of my telling someone 3 weeks ago, get rid of those signs.
Is there, I know,
Had a few things.
you said you'd be running a little bit late.
Yes, and I'll email you. I'm not exactly sure my flight status or times exactly. I just feel like it's like 5:40.
Is there anybody
Get
that's
here.
here right now that knows for sure they won't be here next week? We'll have to wait for the other two to get here in just a second. But as soon as they get here, does anybody have any other questions for staff or any comments? We're gonna get ready to adjourn here in just a second.
As soon as we gather everybody back.
Yeah.
What fund does the liquor sales? What fund does the liquor sales?
Okay,
Will you
and
be
but
here
they
next week?
enhance 4B also.
I got a 50/50. I didn't want to board to that.
Sales
Okay.
tax.
Thursday night.
Okay.
Sales tax, every sales tax is actually going to the
God,
But
I picked
Liquor
liquor
sales.
off the floor and put it
now
on.
sales tax,
No.
when they sell a bottle of liquor, we get the sales tax.
You get sales tax and you get liquor tax.
Right, that's not.
And it goes to general fund.
Just
And
general.
that's,
What are you doing?
Because if you go by the new liquor stores, they're.
You sort through and get out what you want, right?
I don't like peanuts.
Yeah, I thought I saw you do that before and I was like, ooh, she's sorting out the good
Are you gonna
stuff.
be here next week?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
yes, for the tour, right? Yes,
We'll send you a meeting.
yes, if the Lord says the same, yes, I will be here.
Do you have anything else you wanna come out before we get going? And next week, we're gonna look at,
facilities,
okay,
but not a tour.
but not a tour.
Okay.
Not a tour, just look at facilities.
Don't show up at 9.
See you in February.
So I'm clear, our first day for tour is February 20th, our alternate is 21st.
That's correct.
At 9 o'clock here on February 20th.
We'll get on a bus.
Yes, get on the bus.
And you know what I'll likely do on the 29th is post both facilities and project prioritization, because you really only have 3 facilities to go through now.
Okay.
So you could be getting into prioritization.
Yep, that would be good.
Next week, we could be in prioritization.
If we're gonna do that, can we also, I know we asked for the tax rate for Richardson, but also look for maybe another metro area that's
Case
as
study.
big as us, like
They gave
Houston.
63 cents.
You
I
were
know-
outside
I know-
the Metroplex?
Yeah, so like Katy, I know the school district has looked at Katy, but if there's another community, and I would say really in Texas, there's only one other metro area that's significant size like this one, and it would be just the Houston market. I don't think San Antonio does it,
Houston,
Really?
San Antonio.
it's not as robust either, so Houston would really be, as far as my mind, thinking about it, but take a look at like-sized cities, we're also looking for age, how old the city is, as well, so something in comparison. And we'll leave up to staff to give us that direction.
Somebody said Richardson was 63-cent tax rate.
Yes. So, but we'll wanna look at those cities, and they can bring that to us next.
Is Irving like us? The larger?
Yeah.
We have all that information. Those are survey cities. All of, we have 17 survey cities in the Metroplex. Now, not in the Houston area, you have to
And,
get that.
and when we talk about, we want, not something that's 200,000 and we shouldn't be really looking at cities that are 60,000. We should look somewhere that, from probably 80 to 100, or maybe 90 to 120,000.
If you look at Denton, if you look at Carrollton, if you look at Richardson,
Yeah.
even Mesquite, they're bigger, but those are more popular cities.
And Carrollton, that's old or newer?
Older.
So when are we gonna start talking about campaign financing.
Outside this range?
That's outside this.
Outside this.
part of this.
Okay.
And it would be after we've already taken it, I mean, we'd probably have to have preliminary conversations at some point, but it would be
Outside.
after we've taken it to
Okay.
that point where.
Okay.
And that's gonna
So-
be,
It'll be
That's why I
after
said
council
rec-
vote too.
and that's in
After
March, so April,
recommendation
May,
of
June,
council.
July, August,
Yeah,
September,
after-
October, November.
After they
It's
vote.
only 8 months.
All right, we're not hearing any other
That's the
questions
I make a
or
motion.
business.
Money.
A motion and a
I second.
second. All those in favor signify by saying aye to adjourn.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff, for all the great info.
Political campaigns for school board and city. You let us.
Lots of good information on with this type of.
So you think we'll be able to raise enough money?
Chick-fil-A in the parking lot. You want,
No, I had it in the lobby.
oh, in the lobby.
I didn't want to sit in my car.
Well, I hope I get a phone call. I got something better than that waiting. I might be doing the same.
I left work 30 minutes early. I only 30-minute lunch, left 30